Hello and welcome to this After Effects tutorial. I'm Matthias from mamoworld.com and I want to show you how to create the following effect. So you can see you have these lines that appear here and that they are moving to the music. They are reacting on the music. And now they slowly start turning into the red giant logo. Okay, so to get you started, I already prepared here a background layer with this blue, black, dark thing here, and then here this blue spot. It's just a solid layer that adds here this blue spot in the middle, and I also have already a layer with this red giant logo. So this is just a picture. And finally, I have already prepared a solid that I called 3D stroke, and that has a mask on it. And this mask, I've set these points here by hand, and I've two keyframes for this mask. So you can see the mask path has here the keyframe where it goes here along the shape of the logo. And then here I have the first keyframe where the mask is simply this line. And what we want to do is we want to apply to this solid layer here the effect 3D stroke. Like this. And now you can see that the stroke is painted along this mask, and now we want to modify it. So the first thing that we want to adjust is the taper. So if I enable taper, you can see that the beginning and the line of the end become very small, which looks nice. Yeah. So I turn off here the visibility of the mask such that you can see better what is happening. You can adjust this further. So if you want to have this effect only on one side, for example, you can reduce here the taper start or end or whatever. But I think it's nice to have it at least to some extent on both ends. Okay, so this is taper, and the next thing that we want to do is we want to transform this path. Yeah? So you can see you have here many transform options. For example, you can bend it, what we are going to do later, and you can rotate it, and the rotation is something we want to do now. So we can rotate it here. You can see in arbitrary ways, in X direction, in Y direction, in Z direction, and what I want to have is just some arbitrary random movement. Instead of keyframing this, I just use some expressions, and since I do not want to write any code, I use iExpressions for this. So you go to Window, iExpressions, so it's below the recording here, but believe me, in this list, if you have iExpressions installed, you will find an entry for iExpressions. And iExpressions has a library of expressions that you can directly apply without writing any source code. And one of them that is already loaded here is the basic wiggle. Yeah? And this one we want to apply to the X rotation and Y rotation and also Z rotation of the 3D stroke effect. So you have here the, where is it? 3D stroke transform. And here we have X rotation, Y rotation, and Z rotation, and we apply it to all of them. And now if you look through here, you can see it is transforming, so it is rotating very fast in various directions. We want it to rotate much slower, so we set this here to 0.05 and apply it again. And now you can see if I scrub here through time, it is just randomly moving a bit. Yeah, this is already the transform here, but here it is randomly moving in different directions. And the problem that we have is it is now moving like this all the time. Yeah, so also at the end, where it should perfectly fit this red giant logo here, it continues to wiggle, so to speak. And what we do to control this is we want to animate this amplitude here over time. So it should not be 100 constant, but change over time. So at the end, we want to have it at 0. For this, we simply only select this layer here without having any property selected and click on this linking icon here. And then we get asked whether we want to create a new slider control, and we say yes. And now you cannot enter here a number anymore, but this is now linked to a new slider control. So let me quickly apply this again to these three properties. Apply. And now you can see we have no wiggling at all anymore. And this is because if we look at this newly created slider, this one here, for the amplitude of the basic wiggle, it is constantly set to 0. Yeah, if we increase it to another value, you can see here we have now the wiggling. Yeah? So what we therefore can now do is simply keyframe the slider. Say when the red giant logo is here, we want the slider to be at 0, so no wiggling at all. So put a keyframe there, and then say here, some time before, we set it to, for example, 100. And now we have here this wiggling going on all the time, and then at the end, the wiggling slowly stops and nicely ends up at this final position. Okay, currently the line is still much thicker than we want it to be, so we set this thickness here to 2. And another thing that we want to do is, of course, we do not only want to have one such line, but we want to have something more interesting going on. So we choose here the repeater. The repeater, if we enable it, gives us several instances, and these we can now rotate. So we can here go to rotation, and this causes each instance to be rotated a bit with respect to the previous one. Let me do here also a few more instances, say 7. And now we want all of this to be a little bit less regular. Yeah? And what we do for this is, first we can also rotate around this other axis, let's say by 14, already looks a little bit more interesting. And now to get more chaotic, we also use here this factor. The idea of this is the following. So if you use here, for example, an X rotation of 30, this means the first one is rotated by 30, the second one is then again rotated by 30, the third one again by 30, yeah, compared to the previous one. And if we set this factor here to, let's say, 1.4, you can see it gets much more chaotic, and this is because the first one is only rotated 30 degree, and the second one is 1.4 times 30 degrees rotated, and the next one again stronger. Yes? In other words, the rotation gets stronger from instance to instance by a factor of 1.4. Yeah, just a little trick to make this here more chaotic. Okay, if you look at what we have now so far, is we have this interesting line object here that is randomly rotating due to our wiggling, and finally transforming into this logo here. Again, you can imagine for this displacement we do not want, or this rotation, we do not want it to go on all the time, but let's say from here on, we just set keyframes for these values and also for the Z displays. From here on until when the logo appears, it should go back to 0. Yeah, so here we want to have 0, here 0, and this one is actually this Z displays, yeah, says how much the instances are offsetted in time or in space. So if I set this to 0, at the end all lines end up at this place here. Yeah? So very nice. The next thing that we want to have is that these lines, so this line should disappear here at the very end. Yeah? Here it should slowly disappear, and what we animate for this is the, where do we have it here? The endpoint. Yeah. So I set a keyframe for the endpoint and say at the very end, or let me just quickly look up where we are here. We are now at the beginning of this giant logo. Yeah. At the beginning of this, the stroke should be fully visible, so the end is at 100%, and now a little bit later, say here, the end should be at 0. And this means we have now here this line disappearing at the end. Yeah. And similarly, let me just reveal the property here. So here we have this end, we have now these two keyframes, and similarly we want to have this at the beginning. Let's say the line should be fully visible only after about 200 frames. So we set here again an end keyframe like this, And at the beginning, the line should not be visible at all, so we set this keyframe to 0. This means now the lines slowly start appearing, and now they rotate, they become this logo, and now the line disappears. Okay, to make the line look a bit more interesting, we also want to add another red giant effect, and this is Trapcode star glow. Here it is. We simply drag it on here, and I want to keep it basically at the basic settings, so at the default settings. The only thing that I want to change is the streak length. I set this to 50 to make it a bit more intense, and I do not like the colors. So we have here this color map A that I set to a preset that is called Desert Sun. It's below the recording, but believe me, it's there. So Desert Sun, and also this second color map I want to set to Desert Sun. So now the basic look of the composition is then finished with this. And what I now want to have is I want to make all of this react on the audio. Yeah. For this, we create a new layer, new solid, and this I call sound keys. Because, as you might imagine, we want to apply to this the effect Trapcode sound keys. What sound keys can do, let me just solo this layer here for a moment, is it can analyze your audio such that you can use it for other things, like, for example, moving these strokes. So you have to tell it what audio you want to use. I want to use this wave file here. Yeah, this is the last layer here in my composition. And now if you play it back, if you look at the RAM preview, you can see here the different frequency ranges of the audio spectrum. And in this, we now want to identify interesting parts that we want to react to. And for this, we better start listening to it first. So the first thing that you can see is whenever you have these bam, there's these drums in the background, you have here some kind of peak in this area. And now with these trumpets, you can see you have here some peak too. Yeah. So let's again listen here at the beginning. The drums make here this bam, this peak in this area. And now the trumpets come. And you can see here you have another peak. Yeah. And these are the two parts that we want to use, that we want our strokes to react on. So we have in total 2 ranges. Sound keys can handle up to 3 of these. And the first one is here active. And for the second one, I also set it active. And if we look here again, scrub through the timeline, this is like this first drum signal that we want to have. So I just put this range here roughly around this area. Yeah, whenever you have this drum, you have here part of this rectangle filled, like this. And now where are the trumpets? The trumpet peak was like this one here. Yeah. So I set the second one roughly around this range. So the idea is whenever we have this trumpet signal, there should be something here inside this rectangle, and whenever we have the drum signal, we have something inside here. Okay, now I will go here to apply. And what this generates, if I look here at the layer now, we have now 2 outputs, which both have here a lot of keyframes. Yeah, and these keyframes correspond to the data here inside these 2 rectangles. So now let's actually do something with this data. So let's say we want from this 3D stroke, or let me first make this sound keys invisible since we do not need it anymore. So from this 3D stroke, let's say we want to animate this in the transform here, this bending. Yeah, this is what, like, if you bend it, you can see everything is more or less compressed here in the middle. Yeah, and the larger you do this value, the more this gets compressed. And what we want to have is that on any drum hit, yeah, we want this here to be, or let's say to the trumpets, yeah, for each trumpet we want this here to be bended a bit. And of course what you could do is to simply go here to these keyframes and copy them and paste them here then to the bending. But the problem is that this is quite inflexible. Yeah? If you want to make it stronger or less strong, the effect, it's difficult to adjust all these keyframes. So what is much more convenient is to use an I expression for this. And for this, we go to the library. There's a special collection which is called audio I expression. And we have some change on beat and change on beat for 1D, 2D, and 3D properties. Yeah? So this bend here is a 1D property. It just consists of a single number. Yeah? In contrast to, for example, XY position, which is a 2D property because it has two numbers here. So we want to modify a 1D property, so we choose change on beat 1D, click OK. And now this I expression is really simple because you just connect it to the output that you want to have. Yeah? And so in this case, we want to connect it to the trumpets, which was output 2, and click here on link to beat. And then you say how strong should the impact be, yeah, the value that should be there at the beat, and just apply this to your property. And it's currently set to add to original value. This means it takes the value you have here and just adds this here up to this when your beat is active. And if we look at this, just look at a quick ramp review. I can see now there are no trumpets, so no reaction yet. And now the trumpets are appearing, and you can see you have this reaction. And this reaction is quite still intense, so maybe let's lower it a bit. Say we set this to 40, and check again. Still quite a lot, so maybe we lower it to 20, and have again a try. Apply and preview. Yeah, like this, I like it. And now we want to have a second reaction not with this bending, but if we go to our repeater, yeah, we want this X and Y rotation to rotate a bit more or a bit less when reacting on these drums here. Yeah? In this example, you see in particular why it's problematic to just copy and paste these keyframes, because if you would copy these sound keys keyframes to the X rotation and the Y rotation, you would lose this value of 30 or this value of 14 here, for example. Yeah? All these keyframes, and also that it goes down to 0, you would lose, which means when there is no beat signal, they would be not rotated at all, which would not look so interesting. So therefore, our change on beat thing here works much better. I reset this change on beat to get a completely fresh instance, and this time I link it to the first output, yeah, to the drums. And now I select this X and Y rotation and apply. And you can see these values become red, so the I expression is now active, but still these values, these keyframes here are accepted, yeah. So this means it is still 13 and 14, and only when we have a beat, like at this position, this beat, you can see these numbers slightly change. Yeah, if you look at the numbers here and I scrub through time, so you can see whenever we have a beat, this value is added to the beat. So you can see now the reaction on the drums. And I think this is still much too intense, so let's lower this to maybe something like 20 and reapply. Yeah, now you have a slight reaction of the rotation on these beats, also on these drums, and now the more intensive reaction on the trumpets. And one little problem that is left now is that you have this reaction on these beats also here at the very end. Yeah, you can see the transition into the logo is not so nice anymore. And this is because you have these I expressions here active that make everything react on the beat, also for the bending. And here at the very last part, we do not want there to be any audio keyframes anymore. Yeah? Therefore, what you can do is we go here to the beginning of the logo and simply delete all keyframes that come after this. Maybe we even go here a bit further, that it starts a bit earlier, and we delete all of them. Yeah, and then we go here where the logo appears and set for both manually one keyframe 0. Yeah, so this means now here at the very end you can see no audio anymore that disturbs the signal. Okay, let's take a look at this. Now you can see the nice reaction on the drums, and now the more intense reaction on the trumpets, and all of this so easily created with this change on lead eye expression in combination with sound keys. And now it slowly transforms into this logo and now disappears. Okay, so that's it from my side. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and also of course join in the next time.